Hello and a very warm welcome to yet another interesting edition of the program CAC Weekly, a weekly program that keeps you abreast on the activities and the achievements of the Corporate Affairs Commission. My name is Amina Jibril. Coming up, University of Oxford studies progress in CAC, and we take a look at CAMA 2020's position on Company Secretary, plus Registrar General gives part on the back to staff involved in software review. But we'll be right back after this break. To stay with us. Welcome back. We begin with another record setter for the CAC. The Corporate Affairs Commission's reform initiatives have continued to gain more accolades from within and outside the country. The laudable reforms, which attracted a series of requests for collaboration from many government and private agencies, have most recently caught the attention of one of the famous citadels of learning in the world, the University of Oxford. The university prides itself as the oldest university in the English-speaking world. Oxford is a unique and historic institution with no clear date of foundation, but teaching existed at Oxford in some form in 1096 and developed rapidly from 1167, when Henry II banned English students from attending the University of Paris. The Ancient Institute of Learning recently sanctioned one of its doctoral candidates, Oliver James Macpherson Smith, to understudy the Corporate Affairs Commission, particularly its recent successes. The Doctor of Philosophy student has just completed his study visit to the Commission, focusing on its history and recent reforms as Nigeria sets to achieve economic diversification. Now, in a chat with CAC Weekly, Oliver Macpherson expressed appreciation to the tremendous support he received from the Commission, particularly the Registrar General and CEO of the Corporate Affairs Commission, Alhaji Garba Abubakar, who shared his wealth of experience with him. While wishing the Commission more success, he described his experience as fantastic and memorable.
I'm here at the Corporate Affairs Commission to learn more about the Commission's history, its current functions, and some of its recent reforms. My doctoral research explores the role of the Corporate Affairs Commission in economic diversification here in Nigeria, and I put forward the argument that before Nigeria can really achieve economic diversification, the Corporate Affairs Commission has to be there, and it plays a central role in supporting that. So supporting the Commission supports diversification. I've met with a variety of different staff in several different departments. I've had the great pleasure of meeting with the Registrar General, who's been very generous with his time, has offered a lot of information about the history of the Commission, some of its recent reforms, and the way in which it's now going under the current administration. And it's been a fantastic experience. So thank you very much for hosting me and for giving me such a warm welcome here at the Corporate Affairs Commission in Abuja.
And now we move on to the efforts the Commission is making to continuously improve on its service delivery. The Registrar General and CEO of the Corporate Affairs Commission, Alhaji Garba Abubakar, has described as second to none the sacrifices been made by officers involved in the weekly review of the company's registration portal, the CRP. Alhaji Garba Abubakar, who stated this at the end of the weekly event, noted with satisfaction the commitment and dedication of the officers who, aside their normal working hours, stay up to 10 p.m. to ensure that identified customer challenges were resolved head-on. He expressed delight over the level of success recorded by the review within a short span, stressing that other notable companies' registries around the world took much longer period to attain such level of stability upon deployment of new software. And now, while describing the participants as resourceful and agile, the Registrar General enjoined them to sustain the tempo to enable them become reference point. He therefore unveiled plans to enlarge the review to include other stakeholders, particularly from relevant ministries, departments and agencies, with a view to speed up the process, amongst others.
We also need to revise our engagement with the people, because there are a lot of issues. The quality of what we are seeing is not of expectation. There is lack of understanding of some of these concepts, particularly on IT. IT is supposed to be more or less a charity. It's not supposed to be for the benefit of the country. You will see objects clearly stating that they will give financial assistance to members. That cannot be. That cannot be. So, and officers are approving it. Then, director registry, we need to have a round table on limited by guarantee. And we have to bring people from Ministry of Justice. Because, yes, we had given them this assurance before.
Now, CAC Weekly recalls that, pursuant to the Gazette of CAMA 2020, the CAC upgraded its registration portal and opened it to the public on 3rd January 2021 to accommodate end-to-end registration. Let's now shift gears and talk about CAMA 2020, the game changer. The CAMA 2020 is a robust framework which attempts to erase bottlenecks and simplify doing business in Nigeria. Its notable feature is scalability, both in requirement and sanctions. Is it mandatory for all companies to have a company secretary? CAC Weekly caught up with Tolulokpe Adeola Shanaike, the Assistant Director, Registry Department, who gives us the answer, as well as highlights more and other initiatives of the CAMA 2020. Enjoy watching.
Thank you for joining us again.
Thank you, Medina.
Okay. On that, the Companies and Allied Matters Act of 1990 obligated that all companies, must have company secretaries. But the Companies and Allied Matters Act of 2020, that's CAMA 2020, under Section 330, if I'm correct, has made an exemption that, smaller companies can have company secretaries. Talk us through why the exemptions.
Okay. That is true, Medina. And you probably would have noticed that notable features of the new law, that's Companies and Allied Matters Act 2020, are flexibility and scalability. Okay. By scalability will mean that both in prescriptions for requirements and in sanctions, the Act considered sizes and the types, the complexities of companies, so that you don't have the same prescription applying to all kinds of companies. So it will depend on your operations, your size, your type. And along those lines, we have the small companies, the private companies other than small, companies limited by guarantee, and public companies. So the same feature, though, was observed, particularly in this regard, the obligation to have a company secretary, was observed very faintly in the repealed law. That is the Companies and Allied Matters Act 1990. Now, Section 292 of that Act obligated all companies to have company secretaries. Now, beyond that obligation, for private companies, it did not make any further prescription. All it did was just to say that the directors must ensure that the persons they want to appoint as company secretary for a private company appears to have the requisite knowledge and experience, no more. Meanwhile, with regards to public companies, it went further to prescribe qualifications for persons to be appointed. That also would have told you that for private companies, the law was rather less prescriptive. Okay. Yes, you should have a company secretary, but just make sure that this person can function in this way.
I'm sorry to jump in here. Can a one-man company have a secretary, a company secretary?
Oh, yes. It's the fact that a one-man company may not necessarily be a small company. You can have a one-man company that is a private company, yeah, but it's not a small company.
Let's go to the issue of who is a company secretary. Because when you say secretary, people take secretary as a more or less assistant of the boss.
Well, in this case, it's not a clerical secretary.
Right.
It's not the kind of secretary that you have, that you have a director, a manager, and then there's somebody providing his clerical assistance, typing his memos, organizing his office, and all of that. No, a company secretary is way, way, way beyond that. He's a professional. The Act does not provide any definition, beyond prescribing qualifications. The Act does not prescribe any definition for who a company secretary is. But if we look at the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance, the NCCG, even though that code also did not define or describe who a company's secretary is, but when we try to understand the philosophy behind its suggesting or advocating that certain companies should have a company secretary. When we understand the philosophy behind that, and necessity for having a company secretary, perhaps we'll better appreciate who a company secretary is.
Okay.
Now, the code recognizes that corporate accountability and business prosperity is very key and largely a function of corporate governance, right? So it depends on the corporate governance that is active, that is available, that's operative in your business operations undertakings, right? Whether you are accountable, whether your business prospers will be a question, okay? Now, principle number 8 of the code, that is the code of corporate governance, identify the company secretary as very key.
Okay.
A key support to the board, a key support to management, of a company in developing and entrenching what you describe as good corporate governance, the practice and the culture in the system. When you look at all of that together, then you can see that the company secretary is that officer in the company who coordinates and manages the activities of the organs of the company. Don't forget that.
It's like the engine room?
Something like that. Okay. It oils the engine room. It's different, but this is the oil that drives the engine room, that sustains the engine room.
Okay.
So it's the one that coordinates and manages the activities of these organs. By the organs, I mean the company at general meeting, the board of directors, and even at this delegated level, the board committees. So it's the one that coordinates them and manages them for effectiveness through the provision of appropriate guidance on matters of statutory compliance, on matters of ethics, on matters of conflict of interest, on matters of good corporate governance.
Okay. For those who will be wondering, why should a company have a secretary?
Now, it is important that those companies that the law requires, that means every other kind of company except small companies, right, should have company secretaries. And this is because of the fact that their activities, their undertakings, their operations, right, are complex, usually. So they are not that simple. And they are the kind of companies that you describe as the public interest entities, right? You describe them as PIEs, public interest entities, because they have significant public relevance, very significant public relevance, on account of their size, the number of people they employ, and the extent of their activities.
Okay.
Now, failure of such enterprises, right, would have significant impact on the public.
Okay.
So it is necessary and imperative that such companies must be afforded every resource they need to succeed, right? Resource support in the areas of professional advice, in the areas of statutory regulatory requirements, as well as corporate governance.
Okay.
So for these kind of companies, there are also the companies that the NCCG focuses on. That's the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance. There are companies that you say they are public companies. They may also be private companies, right, that are holding companies for public companies or other regulated entities. Now, regulated entities, meaning companies, though private, but they are required, beyond submitting returns to the Corporate Affairs Commission and the Federal Inland Revenue Service, they also have regulators, other regulators, industry regulators, who require them to submit returns.
Okay.
Right? So for instance, operators of pensions administration, they may be private. Even banks, they may be private, but beyond the CAC and the FIRS, they're also subject to some other regulations in the industry, CBN, PENCOM. Right. And then you have privatized or concessioned companies. Again, because this will have government participation and interest. So these are public interest entities because of their activities.
Okay.
And because of the number of people they employ. It is important.
Okay.
It
that
is
they
important
have
that they have a company secretary.
Okay, so let's go to the appointment of the company secretary. How is this appointment done? And on what basis here?
Okay. Now, the company secretary, the powers to appoint one is resident in the directors by virtue of the law. It's a statutory requirement provision, section 333. Now, that section gives the board of directors the powers to appoint a company secretary. So both the appointment and the sacking, so to say, subject to certain conditions again, of a company secretary, those powers are resident in the board of directors.
Okay.
Now, the appointment may be in-house, in which case a company may decide to just employ a company secretary. So you can appoint from your employees or just freshly engage somebody as an employee. So he's an employee of the company.
Okay.
So that is in-house. The function may also be domiciled externally. You can appoint a company secretary and he's just a consultant to you.
Okay.
In which case, he's not your employee.
Okay.
Right? But whether he's in-house or external, the law is clear about one thing. He is considered alongside the directors and the managers of the company as an officer of the company.
Okay.
So for the purpose of statutory compliance and accountability, he is an officer of the company.
Okay. So what would be the qualification of a company secretary?
For private companies, because what the law now says in 330 is that remove small companies. All other companies must have company secretaries. Now, all other companies will mean private companies that are other than small. They are private companies, but they are not small.
Okay.
In the regular parlance, you address them, you refer to them as big companies. But the language of the law is other than small companies, right? And then you have, let's talk about the profit-making undertakings now.
Okay.
You have the public liability companies, the PLCs, right? Now, while the law does not make prescription qualifications for those who want to appoint secretaries of private companies, right? Even though they are public interest entities, it makes prescription qualifications for those who are appointing public secretaries of public companies.
Okay.
Now,
So let's go into the public ones.
okay,
The public
so
companies.
so for a person to be eligible for appointment as a secretary
Okay.
in a public company, you must be either a lawyer, a chartered accountant. By a lawyer, that means you must belong to MBA. You must have the right to practice. You must have been called to the bar.
Okay.
Then a chartered accountant who must be a member of any recognized professional body constituted by law for accountancy to regulate the practice of accountancy. Or you must be a member of the a chartered secretary. That means you must be a member of ICSAN.
Okay.
Right, Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, right? Then, if we're looking at a corporate body, I mean, you can have corporate bodies now, but the membership and the firm must be composed of all these persons, professionals.
Okay.
They must all together be professionals in these areas, right? You can also have somebody who has been a company secretary of a public company for 3 years in the last 5 years before his appointment. So what that means is that he's had experience in that role, in that function, because he had functioned in the last 3 years. I mean, 5 years of before his appointment, he has functioned at least 3 of those 5 years as a secretary
So
of a
he or
public
she
company.
must have cognitive experience.
Thank you. He may not necessarily be a member of this a professional
Bodies.
so to say, but he's had the experience
Okay.
by virtue of having acted in that role for at least 3 years of his last 5 years.
Okay. So let's go into the roles that the company secretary is supposed to play, because we said a company secretary is different from the normal secretary
yes.
that we
It's not, yes.
that we do see in the offices. So what are the specific roles that a company is expected to play?
Well, his roles are multifold.
Okay.
Now, while he's administratively responsible to the managing director, chief executive officer, he's also functionally responsible to the board of directors.
Okay.
The board of directors is an organ of the company. The company itself, that is members at general meeting, is another organ,
Okay.
right? And then you have delegated organ, the board committees, right? The company secretary has a function, reporting line to the chief executive officer, because he is an officer of the company,
Okay.
right? And the chief executive officer is the one that is responsible for directly managing the company.
Okay.
You know, but aside that, is also responsible
To the board?
functionally to the board,
Okay.
because he must provide necessary guidance, he must provide necessary advice, you know, so that everybody knows what to do. Now, he is that medium through whom information will flow
Okay.
to all stakeholders. You know, by stakeholders, from the board to shareholders, from the board to board committees, from the board to management committees, from the board to regulators like the CAC, the FRS, the SEC, the PENCOM, the NCC, the CBN, the NICOM, and all others.
Okay.
So you find that he has very many roles
To play.
Okay. Right? But his statutory functions are enshrined in the Act.
Okay.
If you look at Section 335, it spells out about 5 or 6 functions.
Okay.
And beyond that, the code also prescribes some functions,
Okay.
you know, for the company secretary. Let's first look at those prescribed by the statutes.
Okay.
The first is what you expect as a company secretary. He must attend. He must also he organizes and attends, you know, and renders secretarial services to the meetings of the company, that is members at general meeting, the meetings of the board, and the meetings of board committees. You know, of course, you wonder, I mean, can he, just one person do all of this?
Yeah.
No, it's an office,
Okay.
the office of the company secretary, and it is properly staffed in an ideal situation. So it's not just one person. One person is the company secretary, but he also has assistants, and then he has other officers. So it is advisable that officers from the office of the company secretary should be the ones providing secretarial assistance and services
Okay.
to board committees.
Okay.
Right.
So, quote unquote, the secretary is like the second Oga.
Well, while he is not a director, except, of course, the law allows that you combine the office of a director and the secretary in one person.
Oh, okay.
You can do that. A director can also be appointed the company secretary,
Okay.
you know, in the private company. Even for public companies, as long as he has the requisite experience, I mean, qualifications,
Okay.
as prescribed by law, right? But he cannot act in the 2 offices at the same time.
Okay.
At a particular time, he's either acting as one
Okay.
or the other.
Is there an age limit
No, there's
for
no
one
age
to
limit.
become a company
No,
secretary?
no. There's no age limit, unlike
Okay.
the directors who are required after attaining the age of 70 to disclose their age anytime they are proposed to be appointed a director after that age.
Okay.
There is no such qualification for company secretary.
Okay.
So talking about his statutory functions, another one is that he must advise the various meetings, whether it is the general meeting, that is members at a meeting, or the board of directors, or the board committees, whichever meetings, he must advise them on the applicable rules and regulations,
Okay.
right? So that everything they do them properly. He must also maintain the registers and other records that the law expects that the company should maintain.
Okay.
For instance, every company is expected to maintain a register of members. Every company is expected to maintain a register of directors. Every company is expected, well, public companies now, to maintain a register of secretaries. Yeah, every company is expected to maintain a register of debentures and charges. You know, and if you're a public company, you're also expected to maintain what you call an index of your members.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Added to that, the new law, that's counter to treaty, has also introduced what you call the persons with significant control.
Okay.
You must also maintain a register for them.
Oh, all right.
Equally, you must maintain a register for persons with substantial shareholdings. Now, it's also expected as the company secretary and a compliance officer, so to say, to render proper returns
Okay.
and give notices to the commission as required. Not just the commission, and to other, if it's a regulated entity, to such other regulators. For instance, the law expects that every company should file annual returns. You must file a return at least once in a year. The law also expects that when there are changes in the composition of your board of directors or in any of the details you have supplied concerning the board, you should notify the commission. When your company allots shares, there are new investors coming into the company, or you even allot to those who already exist, you should notify the commission.
Okay.
When you have decided to change your name, you should let the commission know. You can't even do that without the approval of the commission in the first place. And when you want to change your form, for instance, a private company can decide to become a public company, you know, for the purpose of raising capital.
Okay, very interesting, the kind of flexibility the CAMA 2020, you know, introduces. I'm afraid we just have to leave it here. Mr. Toluekwe Shanaike, Assistant Director, Registry Department, thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you, Medina, for having me again.
And that's where we draw the curtain on this week's edition of the program, CAC Weekly. We do hope you enjoyed watching. Now, for comments and inquiries, please take advantage of our social media handles and our helplines. On Instagram and Facebook, it is Corporate Affairs Commission. Our email is cservice@cac.gov.ng. Our website is at www.cac.gov.ng. And our helplines are on the numbers 081-822-99016 or 081-822-98971, 090-874-01598 or 090-874-01599 and 090-874-01600. Do join us next week for another interesting edition of the program CAC Weekly. Same time, same station. From me, Amina Jabril, and the whole team here, it is bye for now.